live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see now. All we want for see vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see. All we want for see vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see now. All we want for see vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see. All we want for see vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see now. All we want for see vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see. All we want for see vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see now. All we want for see vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see. All we want for see vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see now. All we want for see vote without violence. Till the end they say all we want for see vote without violence. All we want for see. All we want for see vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for see, all we want for see, vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for see, all we want for see, vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for see, all we want for see, vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for see, all we want for see, vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for see, all we want for see, vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for see, all we want for see, vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for see, all we want for see, vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for see, all we want for see, vote without violence. Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, vote without violence.
Hello and welcome to TDN Africa Media, to yet another edition of our election coverage coming to you on TDN Africa Media. And I am your host AMADU Esba, and with me in the studio I have Mr. ARUNA KARGBO, who is our guest today. Mr. KARGBO is the editor for the New Age newspaper. Mr. KARGBO, you're welcome to the program Election Coverage.
Good evening to you, and good evening, listeners and viewers, and thanks for having me.
All right. And today in our election program, we want to look at a very, very critical topic that has got to do with the development of our election. So, we all know that the youth, or the voice of youth, is very, very much important in the development of our electoral processes. And the participation of youth is something everyone is looking forward towards and seeing how that can be visible in our electoral processes. That's why we want to discuss the question today. How loud is the voice of the youth in our nation, especially during this time? That is to look at it. And that is why we have Mr. KARGBO here today, who happens to be a very independent individual. Whatsoever that he may have to say on the program here, precisely will have to be his opinion and not that of the opinion of TDN. And we're just here to analyze the question. Once again, you're highly welcome to our election program, and we're saying this is the first time you're coming to our studio.
Sure.
Yes, how does it feel like being here?
Well, for me, it's nice.
Okay.
And of course, being here now, I feel relaxed.
Okay.
And thanks again for having me.
All right. And we want to also say thank you for accepting our invitation and for accepting to be part of the guests that will be helping us to discuss issues relating to elections. So today we want to look at a very sensitive topic. You can agree with me and that the progress of this country is highly dependent on in the hands of the youths, so to speak. And somebody would want to ask the question: how loud is the voice of the youths in Sierra Leone, especially during this time?
I must say the topic of discussion itself is one which is not only critical but very essential, so to say, because mind you, as far as Sierra Leone is concerned, looking at our population, the youth, we have a bulk of a youthful population, you understand? So it tells you that there is no way you are going to downplay issues of the youth. What I mean by that, considering their number, they have a major role to play in our society. And as people always say, they are the future leaders. So if we don't get the youth right, then we are getting every other thing wrong. So having said all of this, that is just to tell you how important or how significant their role is in society, and not to talk of the election. Because mind you, they are decision makers. They are decision makers. Because by that I mean, now we are approaching the election. If I may say, I think, is it less than 2 weeks or so? So imagine them voting. Imagine if the youth decide to vote for one individual, I mean one of the presidential aspirants. And that together with other votes you may get from other people and the likes, you are elected. So it tells you the centrality of the youth.
Okay. Now, you just given the brief background of how important the youthful population are when it comes to our electoral processes. That is to say, politicians have to really make a way to win the hearts of the young people,
sure,
in order for them to be able to obtain power.
Sure.
But when it comes to political participation, one would like to ask, how loud is the voice of young people when it comes to political participation in Sierra Leone?
Okay. I think you asked this question earlier on. Probably you are not satisfied with the way I answered it, so I'm going to speak to that again.
Exactly.
So talking of how loud their voice is, especially at this critical moment, the only way we are going to determine that is their actions. In other words, what they do. Then again, you may want to to ask or to know whether if these actions that are being taken or that have been taken by the youths, if these actions have yielded any fruit. In other words, if they have made progress. Because, mind you, for me, any serious government in this country, I repeat, any serious government in this country, if you really want to rule, and you rule with the expectation to rule again, you have to take the issues of youth very serious. For example, anytime you hear of protests, riots, and things like that, it has to do with a greater number of the youth. So, in a situation wherein we don't have a government that listens to what the youths are saying, then it's a problem. And the only way we can say their voices have been heard is when the particular government in charge listens to them. Yes.
Okay, so coming to the government listening to the young people of this country, or to put it straight, the youths of Sierra Leone, and there is a myth that there's been a huge gap between the government and that of the youthful population in Sierra Leone. Being that we have a very youthful minister, and young people think we still have youth languishing to push, and we have a youth minister, but you still have young people who are without jobs. Do you think that also speaks to the development of young people in this country, and especially do you think it is fair enough to the democracy of our country when it comes to young people, especially?
You know, when you mention this, for me, it is very sad. I say so because we are living in a very sad state of affairs. Many a time, other people will tell you that the youth are not serious, you understand? But again, we need to ask ourselves, the opportunities, have they been created for them? And they have refused to take charge of the opportunities created. Just as you mentioned, we have a youth minister. For me, I will want to say kudos to him because he has been doing well and he has done so many good things. But I think the major problem we have most often than not is implementation of programs. Because when you read on papers, you see very beautiful, crafted programs. You understand? But when it comes to implementation, I think that is where the problem is. And for me, in as much as we may want to blame the youth themselves, but I want to say it is very unfair on their part, because much has not been done for them as far as I'm concerned. And talking of Kush, you made mention of Kush, is that not so? Which, if I can recall, the youth minister has spoke about in several occasions, and he referred to it as marshmallow. And the intake of Kush by our youth is a major problem, is a call for concern. But interestingly, as far as I'm concerned, it is either nothing has been done or much has not been done to curtail its coming in country. And sitting here, fingers have been pointed to foreign business people who are into the importation of kush and other harmful drugs, which today is affecting our youth. And the other day, I had a very interesting conversation with somebody, and we were discussing these issues of 5-0s, 5 stars, and the likes, you know. And one thing he said to me, which I take from that conversation, is that he said people are saying that since this government came to power, that there has been less issues around stabbing and the like, you understand? Like, during the previous regime, it was frequent for you to hear that youths have, you know, engaged in X, Y, and Z, and people have been But so the individual said that it is not as a result of this regime. What he said was that it is as a result of these harmful drugs that are being consumed by our youth.
Yes.
For him, he said, for example, after taking push, you are in a state of dizziness. You become drowsy. You will be sleeping. You know? So at that time, you don't have that stamina. You don't have that thinking to say, oh, let me grab a knife or whatsoever harmful objects, you know, to do something harmful. So just imagine. So these are some of the things.
Okay. So it is very obvious that we are definitely going to look at the impact of these drugs on young people, especially during this time. You just in your opening statement, you stated that when you talk about protests and riots, youth get involved in these activities. Now, looking at the fact that this government, as you said earlier, either they have done something, or much have not been done, or more is needed to be done. Now, looking at the the future of the youth during this election process, do you think we are going to have more youth into drugs?
Well, talking of youth, election, drugs, of course we already have the intake. You understand, the intake of drugs, and which is of serious concern. So imagine in a situation wherein a number of them who are used to taking these drugs, on election day, probably they wake up and they decide to have it. There is every possibility or likelihood that they may not vote. Because mind you, the moment you consume these drugs, and for them, and of course when you go through social media, and even besides social media, these days you even see them. In your community, you see them. They will be sleeping on themselves. They will just stand still in a particular position, you know, with a downward movement or bend and so on and so forth. So imagine things like that. So it is possible that can affect the electioneering process in the sense that they may not vote. And again, I think you mentioned a gap or so. I think the problem here is it has to do with a gap in communication. A gap in communication. In the sense, read the special investigation reports for the August 10 incident that was put out. That was a key issue that was mentioned, that there is a gap in communication, especially from government and the youth. To the point of mentioning that the youths are dissatisfied. And of course, when people become dissatisfied, at the end of the day, they become angry. And they look for the slightest of opportunities to react. And another thing is unemployment. In a situation wherein you have unemployed youth, there are rogue politicians who are looking for that opportunity to give them a little token and use them for their own advantage. And of course, plenty things have happened within this administration that has pointed to that. But maybe as the program progresses, we'll get to that and discuss some of these things.
All right. So now let's come back to the participation of young people in politics. We know from the elitic point of view, you have the grassroots, or let me say from a political point of view, you have the grassroots, and then you have those young people who are into national executives of political parties. In your view, as a journalist, do you think the voice of the youths in these political parties who've been very, very vocal so far?
Well, I wouldn't want to say that it has been or it has not been. What I'm going to do is to look at the situation and then relate it to the reality on ground. You understand? As you have mentioned, within the political landscape, you always have the grassroots, you know. Although some people sometimes, most often are not consider them as the uneducated people, you understand?
Yeah.
Of course, you mentioned even you have youth who are within the party structures and things like that. Of course, they get to benefit, and some of us are seeing it now. They get to benefit. But the thing is, electing most of these parties into power, make no mistake, it comes from the grassroots. For example, for the current president now, His Excellency, retired Brigadier Julius Maada being in power today, it was as a result of a bulk of the grassroots population. Whether you take it within the SLPP as a party or other factions who are not part of the SLPP, but it's happened as a result of the grassroots. But what happens after election is most of them are left neglected, which to me is unfair. Of course, one may want to say there are a number of programs that have been introduced. It is not only by this regime, even the past regime, because we may want to go into the youth in agriculture, the famine, and things like that. But to date, we still have this problem. Imagine that, I think, is it the UNDP Human Index report of 2022? According to that report, we have up to 60% of unemployed youth in this country. Imagine that situation. Despite all of these fine programs that have been introduced. For example, with this current youth ministry headed by Mohamed Oman Bangura, they have brought so many programs. For example, you look at the car wash program. And I think is it 28 car wash centers have been constructed right across the country. Wherein if you go to some of these centers today, you see youths there washing cars and things like that. Which for me, it prevents them from going into other illegal activities. And of course, there was also a program for the supply of fishing equipment and things like that, which targeted, I think, 70 communities, you know, all of these programs. There are so many programs. You have the Munafa Fund project, which has to do with giving of incentives to people who are into SMEs. You have a lot of them. You have this, is it National Youth, what have you, talking of the graduate internship program, I beg your pardon, which at the end of the day, some of them are absorbed to secure jobs. But still, we have a large number of unemployed youth. So the question goes, what is the problem? Is it that some of these things, when it comes to implementation, the politicians are not being honest? So we need to think around some of these things.
Okay, we'll have to talk about the honesty part of the politicians later on in the program as we move forward. But again, in these political parties, that is to say, especially, let's take for example, the ruling Sierra Leone People's Party and that of the APC. You know, we always have this, there's a separate body or a separate wing in these political parties that represents the youthful population in that particular party. I mean, in these parties. So looking at the political scene, on the surface of it, do you think young people are at the front line in terms of campaigning? Especially young people that are in these parties. Do you see them topping the list in terms of campaigning for their candidates?
Well, I want to say yes to you.
Okay.
Yes. For example, look at this present SLPP administration. You know, a lot of guys who were appointed as press achaches or information achaches to different countries, now they are in countries. And they are on the ground, you know, campaigning to see that their party gets elected.
Okay, let's put it this way. Not about their parties getting elected, but to say, in the party, in terms of decision making, do you think these young people really have have a say in terms of decision making in these political parties?
Well, in as much as I would have loved to discuss issues around that,
Yeah.
but I think I'm a little bit constrained in the sense that you can only know some of these things if you are within the internal structures of their parties. What do I mean? Because as you have clearly said, they have their youth wings and things like that. So you may begin to wonder if really, if some of these wings, if they are effective, and if they are effective, it should mean that we should see a large number of youths being represented. You understand? But that is not the case. So which to me, I would want to say I don't think that is happening. That is not happening.
And many Sierra Leoneans also want to believe what you're saying, that if you look at the campaigns, I mean the ones that are giving the messages to Sierra Leoneans, you see them all as old politicians that have been in the game for ages. What do you think that means for politics, and especially for young people?
Well, for me, I think the narrative has to change. In the sense, now let's wait and see what this election will bring. Understand? But I'm going to tell you that the narratives will change.
How do we get to that change?
How do we get to that?
Yeah, it is something someone would want to understand.
The reason why I'm saying the narrative is going to change, and the narrative will start by changing when the youth themselves think that, you know, we have to take charge. We need to come on board. Because for me, I think the problem is young people feel too comfortable. You understand? They find themselves in a position and they think that they are okay. They don't have that urge, you understand, for more and things like that. But I'm going to tell you that the narrative is going to change, because imagine that for a very long time now, for a good number of years, we have been seeing, as you rightly mentioned, we have been seeing all these old faces. And over again, we continue to see them. Is it that the young people are not capable? Is it that they cannot match the job or the responsibility? But I want to say that they can. Only if given the opportunity and the space. They can. They can do that. They can do it. But provided if the platform is created. It is only when the platform is created, then they can take charge. But I can tell you, for example, look at is it the NRM or so at the APC? It's very interesting. And I'm going to tell you, after this election, come 2028, for me, this is just my own projection. I'm foreseeing a radical change within the APC, wherein young people will force themselves to take charge. It is possible.
And by then, what would that mean for our political landscape? I mean, for our politics inside it?
Well, for me, when that happens, it tells you, or it tells us that that indeed there is liberation on the way. Because reason being, if the youth are in charge, they can bring their youth fellows on board. You understand? They can bring them on board. But if we continue to keep up with these old phases who have been there for a very long, and again, that is why you find it, or we find it very difficult to control certain activities. To control certain activities, for example, talking of corruption and things like that. Because the moment you come, you want to make yourself as a new player, you understand, as a new kid on the block, and you want to effect or implement certain changes, then the ones you will meet, who are the old ones, they will not give you that chance. They will fight you at all costs not to succeed. So imagine. So, but in a situation wherein the youth take charge of situation, they themselves will have the awareness that we need to bring those of us who think alike on board. So let's wait for things like that to happen.
All right, let's wait for things like that to happen. If you're just joining us, you're watching election coverage program coming to you on TDN Africa Media. And today we're looking at a very crucial topic which asks, how loud is the voice of youth in our nation, Sierra Leone, especially as we're running down to our election. For us to discuss that in detail, we have Mr. ARUNA KARGBO, editor for the New Age newspaper, who is with us in the studio to talk about this. We're going for a short break and we'll be back very soon.
Voting peace. CD and they say, all we want for all we want for sin, all we want for sin. CD and they say, all we want for sin, all we want for sin, all we want for sin. Now not the time we for better, we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election.
So the program Elections Coverage coming to you on TDN Africa Media. Don't forget, you can also be part of the show by sending in your opinion to the number showing on your screen, or you drop your comments in our comment section. Today we're looking at a very, very important topic in the program, which asks the question, how loud is the voice of the youth in our nation, especially at this time? It is very, very much important that the voice of young people is very much loud during this period. So now, back again to the topic. And we are looking at that time. We are looking forward to that time when young people will come to the front line of politics, when young people will be the ones that to decide what is going to happen next in terms of developing our country. Now, there have been a lot of challenges, especially in this particular system of our election, with the PR system. Do you think young people really understand this system? And speaking to it, how loud has their voice been so far?
Well, talking of the PR system, of course, as you have mentioned, and whether if the youth have understood it and things like that, of course, there were complaints. There were complaints, especially with regards to the ECSL. Even journalists themselves have been complaining that there is a poor communication from ECSL in relation to their activities and things like that. So imagine in a situation if journalists who are the news carriers, and of course don't forget the role of journalists, which has to do, which is not only limited to information dissemination, but entertainment as well as education, among others. So if they are complaining, so you tell me, what will the masses say? And it is very, very critical when it comes to election. Education around election is something that is very, very essential. So it goes to say that it should be treated with all the seriousness it deserves. So as to whether the youth understand the PR system, I cannot tell you that. But the only thing I can say to you is there has been complaint that the ECSL is not communicating, that there is that communication gap. And I don't know if that has been fixed by the ECSL. But if I can recall properly, I think even TDN hosted, I don't know whether if it's the communication director or whosoever, the ECSL. I think it was you who interviewed the particular individual. I watched that program.
Okay.
So I don't really know whether if that has been addressed. And looking at the time now, there is no more time on the favor of ECSL, you know, because just 2 weeks from today, we will go into the polls. So imagine if the masses do not understand the system, how are they going to cast their votes? And at the end of the day, ensure that we have valid votes. And of course, as I said earlier on, the youthful population is the largest in this country. And you know, you don't want to play with them. Because if you don't get them right, then there is a problem. But if the right message has been passed on to them, then they are going to do the right thing. But in a situation wherein the right education is not given to them, then there is a problem.
Highlighting the problem is just one side of it, and we're going to come to a very special segment in the program where we'll start giving recommendation to young people themselves. Now, we want to look at the voting pattern in Sierra Leone. We all know since 1978, we have a very fragile political practice. We are a very, very parochial country. We are practicing a parochial system of politics in our country, meaning we have not grown as a democratic country as in 100%. And over the years, the youthful population is what the politicians have used as a tool in order to maintain power and in order to defraud elections. And you want to look at that. What are the possibilities to set youth apart in terms of not engaging in such activities during this election?
It is simple. And I will keep emphasizing on that, which is education. It has to do with education. Because the moment you sensitize people, you tell them what is good and what is bad, then they are in the position or the capacity to know what to do and what not to do. You understand? And as you have rightly mentioned, over the years and to date, rogue politicians are into the habit of using the youth to achieve their own selfish gains or interests. And some of the reasons to that are just that obvious. And one of which is unemployment. Imagine the unemployment rate of the youth. Imagine, okay, now let's leave unemployment and also look at underemployment, things like that. And all of these things compound the issues affecting the youth, and one of which is poverty. My brother, if you find yourself in a situation or in a position wherein for you to get a loans for a day is a problem, there is every tendency for you to be influenced to do things you may not want to do or get yourself engaged into. You know, and of course, you mentioned, except otherwise, if I'm wrong, you can correct me. Of course, our voting pattern in this country, even though there are people who do not want to hear some of these things, but they are just the sad reality. Be it the youth or the other segments of our population, but people still vote on ethnic and regional, sentiment and things like that. And for that to change, it will be very difficult because people are still attached or glued to things like that. So that is why you see, for example, if you go to the north, you see that the APC is in charge. You go to the south and the east, you see that the SLPP is in charge. So for things like that to change, it will take time until as a people, we begin to take the national interest first before things like that will change. Other than that, it will be very difficult for things like that to change in this country.
A lot of people judge the youths of Sierra Leone to be indecisive. Do you subscribe to that?
Indecisive? In what sense?
They are saying the young people do not have a stand when it comes to making decisions. They can say yes to this, and then the next thing,
tomorrow,
they will say no, and they can say no, and the next thing they will say yes.
Well, I wouldn't want to answer your question directly to say yes, they are indecisive, or no, they are not. So in answering a question of this nature, we need to discuss, bring some of the parameters, you understand?
And of course,
let's unravel it.
Yes, let's unravel.
So it's just like the only way you can gain independence is when you are strong enough to be independent. I hope you understand what I'm about to say. For example, if your mother haven't given birth to you, and you are still living with her, you understand? She feeds you, she clothes you, and you are still sleeping in her house. And she tells you, this is what I want you to do. Will you say no? You will not say no.
You will not.
So for me, I think it is a situation of this nature that the youth are in. Because if they have a well-secured job, you understand, they are working, they are employed with a decent job, they earn their money at the end of every month. Tell me, will a politician come from nowhere and say, I have X, Y, Z amount of money, I want you to go and do X, Y, and Z for me? Is that possible? It will not happen. That will only happen now in a situation wherein the individual is someone who is not satisfied with what he or she has. But my brother, the bottom line is what is the analysis I've just made for you. If they have a decent job, a well-paid one, at the end of every month, you know that this is what I'm receiving. And what I'm receiving is enough to take care of myself and probably take care of some members of my family. Tell me, who will influence you to take a wrong decision? You will not.
And it's not just about taking the wrong decision or making the right decision. When it comes to political decisions itself, does a youth really need to have a better life to be very, very, very much open or have a very good political orientation as to know which government will favor you as a youth or which government will not favor you in any way? Do you really need to have a good job for you to have that sound mind to be decisive?
Well, you know, in all of these things, content mind, integrity, and things like that come into play. But however, my brother, there is something we are not going to rule out, that we cannot take out of this. You understand? Which is you need to have that capacity. In other words, you must have earning. You understand? No matter how little, you must have something that you are doing for you to take certain positions or make certain decisions. You must have something. If you do not, it will be very difficult for you. Even in our homes, if you are the husband, and you cannot meet certain needs in the home, you don't have a voice. See, this is just the reality. It is just the reality.
Okay. So now let's put it this way. We've unraveled the challenges. Moving forward, politically, what is the future of young people? Do you think more young people need to come forth politically, or do we need more young people to be participating in politics in order for young people to have a clear mind of political orientation?
I want to say yes. We need more young people to come in. That is why when we look at two of our main political parties in this country, if you go through their manifestos now, you will see things like inclusion, that is inclusiveness and things like that. Talking of getting young people on board, they always make noise around some of these things. That we need to get the youths on board, But when it comes to the reality on the ground, it's a different ball game. You understand? So they always have these narratives, talking of bringing the youth on board. But in reality, that is not happening. Because you see a very small number of the youth being included. And especially in decision making. Because the only way the young people can influence decision making is when they are at the top. If you are not at the top, how do you influence decision? For example, let's take this present administration. If we are now to do a head count, how many ministers do we have in this administration that are youth? How many? And if we go by the definition of youth in this country now, I think it's 18 to 35. So me sitting here, very soon I will cease being a youth. You understand? So imagine a situation wherein they go to cabinet, they discuss, and you don't have a bulk of youth representation in cabinet. So tell me, what happens when decisions are made? Let's look at our parliament. How many members of parliament do we have that are youth in our parliament? So these are some of the things. We need to begin to think around some of these things. Imagine a situation wherein we have a large number or a fair number of youths in our parliament, and in ministries and things like that, for me, then you will begin to see changes.
Changes. And change is one of the things every youth are craving for. And the youth of this country will crave for that so much that people think they need to take charge of their own future. They need to take the front line of politics. A lot have been said. And now we have political parties who are campaigning to take the ends of power again. You have the ruling Sierra Leone People's Party government, who put out the People's Manifesto, and you have the APC, All People's Congress, who are being there once, and for now they've been the main opposition party for the past 5 years. If you are to speak to the young people of this country, both manifestos are out. You're not telling them who to vote for or not. What should they really look out for in these manifestos that you think would favor them as young people?
You know, for a very long time now, I will want to see our politicians have not been honest with the masses. Because the reason why I'm saying this, before coming to power, they make so many promises. But after gaining power, when it comes to implementation, then there is a problem, you know. And when you read some of these manifestos, you see well-crafted plans. For example, if you now take the APC manifesto, you will see well-written plans as to how the problems of the youth will be addressed. And if you take the ruling SLPP government manifesto, you will see similar things. For example, even in the SLPP manifesto, they have promised that if re-elected, that 500,000 jobs will be created. So for me, I'm calling on the youths of this country to look at some of these critical things, because for me, these are gray areas. They need to look at them, ponder around some of these things, reason around them, and try to relate them on reality on the ground. For example, the APC has been in power, you understand, before the coming of the SLPP. There were things they said, you understand, and there were things they did. And to me, I'm sure the youths are not oblivious of some of these things. They are very much aware. Yeah. So this is the time for them to sit down in their quiet moment of time. They reason around some of these things, try to make sense out of them, not just to wait for somebody or some people to come and begin to say X, Y, and Z. You understand? Vote for us, we are going to do X, we are going to do Y, we are going to do Z. No. They need to really reason around some of these things and decide on what to do in terms of voting and other decision making. For example, not because some people or an individual has come with money, you understand, or some other material things to say, okay, let's go out and rally, or I want you to vote for me, or to vote for this party, and then you just, on election day, you wake up and you go and you do that. No. Because the thing is, for any time the youth make the wrong decision, especially when it comes to voting, that decision affects the youth for the next 5 years. And this is not a 5 month or a 5 week or a 5 days thing. It's 5 years, good 5 years. So which is the reason why they need to be very critical they need to reason in terms of making decisions.
At a very fine, you made a very fine point when it comes to highlighting what youth needs to do in terms of listening to both the manifestos. As you said, the ruling government is already there, promising 500,000 jobs, and many youth have been asking the question, you're already there, why haven't you seen 200 of that for the past 5 years? But let's leave that to that. It is politics for us, we know that. But we also want to look at the voice of young people speaking against the ill of government during this time. Do you think the youth have that platform to speak against the ills of government?
Well, you know, to speak against the ills of government, for me, is a good thing, especially when people feel dissatisfied. You understand? And with all due respect to this administration, they have made progress in some areas. You understand? Of course, they were faced with challenges, which we are not going to rule out, because let's take the corona pandemic, this Ukraine, China, X, Y, and Z, you understand? But talking of the youth expressing their concern, for me, I think that space has not been created. Because the reason why I say this, let's look at the numerous incidents that occurred. Let's take the Paneva prison break. Then let's move to the Lonsar riot. We move to the Tumbo riot and that of McKinney. You know, on several occasions, groups have written asking for permission to be granted for them to demonstrate. But for one reason or the other, the police didn't grant those permissions. You understand? Which, for me, I want to believe led to most of these, you understand, activities, those ugly incidents that occurred. So, which goes to say that a listening government will have created the platform, you understand, to hear what these people have to say and then decide on the next step. Because if that had happened, most of those things could have been averted. But that didn't happen. So you asking if the young people have that platform, for me, I don't think they have it.
And what does that tell for the democracy of our country? Young people haven't got the voice to speak up against the ills of government. What does that mean for our country and our democracy?
For me, it's a call for concern. You understand? Because, as I said earlier on, the young people make up a bulk of our population. Of course, reading government, they tell you majority rights. Is that not so? Even though you have the minority rights as well.
Sure.
But imagine a situation wherein a majority of the population is being ignored. Isn't that a recipe for chaos?
It is.
Because the moment they go out of hands is a problem. It's a call for concern. So it is serious. And of course, when we talk of peace, there is what we refer to as positive and negative peace. It doesn't mean that because you see people going about their normal business and things like that, and they are not into conflict, no fighting is taking place, that, oh, this society is peaceful. No. There are other factors you look at, you consider for you to see this society is peaceful. That is where the issue or the idea or the concept of negative and positive peace comes in. These concepts come in. You understand? Because for there to be what is referred to as a positive peace, it means there should be the absence of war, and there is as well social and economic justice. In other words, there is even distribution of natural resources. But the moment some of these things are missing, is a call for concern.
And we're going to look out for the missing for the missing things later on in the program. If you're just joining us, you're watching our election coverage coming to you on TDN Africa Media. You can also send in your opinion via text message or call us to the number showing on the screen, or you drop your comment in our comment section. We're going for a short break. When we come, we're going to continue. Keep on watching.
Now not the time we for better, we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not an option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for sin. Vote without violence. All we want for sin. All we want for sin. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for sin. Vote without violence. All we want for sin. All we want for sin. Vote without violence.
Welcome back. You're watching our election coverage coming to you on TDN Africa Media. With me in the studio, I have Mr. ARUNA KARGBO, who is editor for the New Age newspaper. He's here today to help us talk about the topic which posed the question. The question, how loud is the voice of the youth in our nation during this time? And Mr. ARUNA, you want to take a reflection on the question again. How loud is the voice of the youth? I mean, during this time, you want to put that question straight. Now, let's speak of the issues around our election. You know, the issues surrounding the call for voter registration, the issue surrounding the fact that many young people who've had problems with their voter registration ID card, and to those who were left out and under allegation that they were underaged. What would you have to say about that? Does that speak to the fundamental human rights of young people who are eligible to vote?
Of course. Mind you, as far as Sierra Leone is concerned, for an individual to qualify to vote, you must be 18 and above. Excuse me. You must be 18 and above, which is the first criteria. And there are other criteria, which is you must be a citizen of the country. You understand? So imagine if an individual has met all of these criteria and he or she is deprived of the opportunity to exercise his or her franchise, then it's a human rights violation. And that should not happen. And talking of the youth, finding themselves in this kind of a difficult situation, then is a call for concern. And of course, as you rightly said, starting from the registration of voters on to the issuing of ID cards, several concerns have been raised. There were several concerns. And especially when they started issuing out the voter ID cards, because there were issues of faceless ID cards, there were issues of misrepresentation, and things like that. Imagine a situation wherein you are a male, and then you receive your ID card with a female photo on it. Imagine things like that. And of course, there was also the concern of people receiving their ID cards and they cannot even recognize the photo on the ID card. And especially when ECSL told Sierra Leoneans that colored ID cards will be printed out. Imagine things like that. So all of these things we are concerns that one may want to see addressed before going into the election. And I want to believe that as of this time, as we are now speaking, I don't think ECSL is considering that anymore, because I want to believe that is something of the past. So it means if you find yourself in that situation, then probably you might end up not voting. And if you do not get that opportunity to vote, which for me is not an opportunity, but your civic right,
it is,
then is a violation of your right. And that should not happen. Even though I understand that the ECSL said, as long as, that is for those who registered, that as long as you registered, you did register, you will have the opportunity to vote, whether you have your ID card or not. The only thing is, it will take time, because for you is a different procedure or process for you to vote. But where the problem is, as you mentioned, in a situation wherein somebody has reached the age to vote, and you were denied that access to register, then it means automatically you are out of this process. Which to me, that being the case, is a serious human rights violation.
And someone would want to agree with you on that. And if you want to say, to keep the voice of young people loud in all of this, do you think young people should try legal means when it comes to the fundamental human rights, especially when it has to do with their civic rights? Do you think young people have to start taking these steps?
Well, I must say yes to your question. They need to, because mind you, our society is a society of law and order. You understand? So there is no way for someone to take the law into his or her own hands. You don't do that, because the moment you do that, you are also committing a crime or an offense. Which for me, there should always be that redress mechanism. In other words, if you find yourself in a situation wherein you have been advantaged or things like that, then you go through the legal means for a redress. But again, let's look at the legal system in this country. Look at the numerous court cases that they have that are yet to be concluded. Let's take the matter of the president's main opposition presidential aspirant. He has been in the court for a very long time. And most people have been saying that by now that matter should have been dealt with long ago. So imagine. So imagine in a situation wherein young people coming up with a case that, oh, we have been disenfranchised, X, Y, and Z, you understand? And they take that matter to the court. Tell me, by the time a judgment will have been delivered on that matter, elections would have been, votes would have been casted.
Okay, now let's talk about the zeal of young people in terms of wanting to ask questions, especially to politicians. Do you think the politicians who've created that platform for them to be asked questions by the young people? And do you think the young people have been asking the right questions?
Well, you know, the issues of asking questions is something that is good. And for me, how I wish young people will crave that habit, you understand, of asking critical questions, especially to politicians. And again, one thing I can say to you is, the politicians don't like that. You are a journalist, you know. For example, if you have them now here in the studio and you begin to ask them critical questions, they go offended. They go offended. They hate it when they are put on the spot. When you ask them questions, they know that these questions are critical. They don't like it. But again, how I wish the youth will develop that habit of asking politicians critical questions and demand for answers. And in a situation wherein they don't get the answers that they are looking for, they take the necessary decisions.
And for the politicians, do you think they've created that platform at all?
But it's the same thing I'm saying.
You said they don't.
They have not. Because for you to create a platform for something, it means you like it. But if you have not created the platform, then it means you don't like it. They don't like it. That is just the reality.
Okay, and now let's
again.
Yes.
The only thing they like is people who call for them. If you come around them and you praise, sing them, you know, you see them as a demigod, then they will like you. Most of them. It is only few of them that, for example, if you are around them, you say things to them which they know they are doing that is wrong. You say some of these things to them that they will look at you and still accept you. But the moment you begin to say things to them they know that they are doing that are wrong, they will see you as anti. So tell me, how can they create a platform for them to be asked critical questions? No.
Okay. We've unraveled and unearthed challenges. Now we want to start looking at, in all of what you've said, it is clear that we can agree that the voice of the youth in our nation is very, particularly during this time, is very, very minute. How do we get that voice loud, particularly when we want to see more young people coming in the front line of politics, seeking for more youth to be participating in politics? What are the strategies that do we need to use as young people in order to get the volume of our voice right up there?
Well, if I'm to provide a recommendation, I think one of the major recommendations is nationalism. Our young people need to be nationalistic. The young people need to move away from this political sentiment ideologies. In other words, they look at national issues from a political lens. No, they need to do away with things like that. Because mind you, There is no way we are going to have a youth population that has a voice. And of course, having a voice means when you say something, people listen to you.
Yeah.
But how are we going to have that when we have, in the first place, we have a youth population that is divided? Youth population is not united. I hope you understand what I'm saying. It's not united. So that is the major problem. The young people need to look at things from a nationalistic point of view instead of from a party sentiment viewpoint. For example, today we have secured a non-permanent seat. You understand? You go now on social media and see some of the comments. You know? Something that should be celebrated. You understand? There are people who are saying other things just because of politics. And if you and I are now to do a survey, we can find out that a large number of these people are youth. Because the youth make up a bulk of the population. So now imagine a situation wherein the young people begin to look at things from a national point of view. Say, okay, this is for the general good. This is not about NGC. This is not about C4C. This is not about APC. This is not about SLPP. This is about Sierra Leone. And work with one voice. Then the young people will have a voice. They will achieve what they want. Other than that, my brother, it will be an uphill task. Very difficult one. Because the youthful population itself is divided along regionalism, ethnicism, among others.
And anytime you talk about politics, people keep on mentioning these things, and they're very, very, very disturbing to the highest degree, thinking that young people shouldn't be part of this particular norm. We should break that cycle. We should be the change makers. How do we come to, stay away from the divide that we've been breached some 50, 60 years ago along political line? How do we get rid of that as young people in this our generation? Nationalism is one, and how do we get past it the more?
Love. Love. You know, and but the major problem is politics, whether you like it or not. The major problem that has created this divide is politics. And the reality is the politicians have succeeded in attaining their desire. So now, it is now the responsibility of young people to also achieve their own desire, which is coming together. You understand? Because I can tell you this authoritatively that today, even when some people call you they see you as their brother, I am telling you this, they will only see you as their brother if you share the same political ideology. Leave it or leave it. Most, if you are not sharing the same political ideology, you are not brothers. Because for them, they even put premium on their political ideology than even their religion. Believe what I'm telling you.
And we seem not to be moving away from that. It seems to be deeply rooted in our political system. So we're about to wrap up. We want to quickly look at the things that youth need to be very mindful of during this election. Let the youth just know the do's and don'ts of this election.
Okay.
What do they need to pay attention to, and what should be the most paramount things that they need to look at?
Okay. Going into this electioneering period, one, they need to pay attention. In other words, be mindful of insightful messages or comments. And they also need to be mindful of the issues of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. Because things like that, if care is not taken, can cause serious problem. And mind you, when there is election, it is the time most of these things, occur. So the youth need to be mindful of some of these things. So in other words, if they hear or they see information on social media, to say, oh, this and this is the result of X, Y, and Z happening at so polling station, they need to wait for official information. Or somebody telling them, you need to this, you need to go out. They need to be very mindful, because this is not the time. For example, someone who is telling you to go out, let him or her lead the going out. You understand? So for me, the youth need to reason around some of these things that I've highlighted and be careful or be cautious in dealing with things of this nature as and when they come up.
All right. We want to say thank you for that particular input for letting us. Viewers, you've been watching the program Election Coverage coming to you on TDN Africa Media. Every Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, we'll be here to talk to different people who will be helping us to discuss the topics that we'll be bringing to you. And today our guest will be Mr. ARUNA KARGBO, who will be with us to help us discuss the topic, which posed the question, how loud is the voice of the youth in our nation, especially this time. Thank you so much, Mr. ARUNA, for coming again. It's been a good time talking to you.
It's my pleasure to be here.
We'll always love to have you around to be helping us with this. And don't forget, always keep a log onto this particular channel, as we're here to bring you independent, credible, and unbiased news. Just before we go, I want you to know that we have different programs for you. We have the Salon Talk program, which starts every morning at 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And we have the current event program, which starts at 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. And if it is on Mondays, you'll have us again at about 6 p.m. every week on Monday, and on Tuesdays and on Thursdays on the election coverage. Don't forget to share our link, and don't forget to ask others to subscribe. Thank you for being with us. I am AMADU. Good night.
Now not the time we for better, we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, that's not to option. During this election, we don't want to tie by division. All we want for see, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, vote without violence. Vote in peace. Vote without violence. Till the end they say, all we want for see, vote without violence. All we want for sin, all we want for sin. Till the end they say, all we want for sin. All for see, all we want for see.
No to violence.
Now not the time we for better we country, we for come together as a family, live in peace and harmony. So during this election, feds not to option. During this election, we don't want no tribal division. All we want for see,
Vote without violence.
vote in peace.
Vote without violence.
Till the end they say,
Vote without violence.
vote in peace.
Vote without violence.
Till the end they say, all we want for
Vote
see,
without violence.
all we want for see.